The anime begins with a young boy named Ryo waking up to find 2 books and a knife on the table in front of him. He walks out of the house and starts exploring his new power, which is manipulating water. Suddenly, he's transported to an unknown place and asks himself in confusion, "Where am I? Really?" That's when an angel appears and asks if he's Ryo. Once he learns that it's Ryo, the angel happily tells him no visitor has come for a long time and he's glad to finally meet someone. The angel reveals the painful truth. Ryo died in an accident. Ryo remembers the accident and realizes the angel is telling the truth, but he says that he knows he'll come back to life again, though he's not sure what he'll do. The angel kindly tells him he's free to do whatever he likes, since he has no assigned mission. Ryo is surprised, thinks for a few seconds, and tells him he just wants to live a peaceful life. The angel explains that he'll return to a world full of magic called Fae, and that about 20% of the people there have magical abilities. He tells Ryo that he'll have water magic since that's what suits him best, and since he wanted a quiet life, he'll be sent to Rondo Forest. The angel tells Ryo there's food inside a small house, enough to last 2 months. Ryo is surprised that the food is frozen inside an ice house, but the angel did this to protect it from monsters so they won't go near it. In his new home, Ryo starts reading books about monsters to learn about them. He's surprised the books are in a strange language, but he can read them easily. He goes outside and starts training his water-based powers. He thinks his power might work with his imagination alone, with no need to speak it out loud. He goes back inside and tries to fill a tub with water, but the water is room temperature. He wishes the water was warmer so he could have a hot bath. He heads outside to gather some wood for a fire, but can't manage to light it, and becomes exhausted from the effort. Lying on the ground, he starts thinking again. He brings out a pot of water and tries to freeze it, but fails at that too. He figures this is tough, and he needs to find out how to make ice. He also wishes he could use the ice spear spell. He focuses on cooling the water and tries to imagine the water molecules and whether he can link oxygen with hydrogen. Finally, he manages to freeze the water because of hydrogen bonds and realizes he can shape the ice however he wants. Afterward, he uses this ice to light the wood on fire, making him really happy. He heads back inside and takes a warm bath just like he wished, feeling incredibly relaxed. His first day feels productive, and he thinks he can make warm water the same way again. Magic really is handy. The next day, he starts eating the food the angel left him. Ryo remembers it'll only last 2 months, so he figures he needs to start hunting before he runs out. He realizes the forest is beyond the barrier, so there will be lots of monsters, and the knife alone won't be enough to hunt them. He'll need attack magic too. It's best for him to start training to live a safe and peaceful life. He heads outside to train again. He fires a ball of water, feeling excited since it's his first successful attack spell, but it doesn't have much power. He figures that makes sense, but doesn't get discouraged, thinking he still has some tricks up his sleeve. He sees that the water ball isn't enough, so he tries using a water gun instead, thinking it'll do better. He narrows the nozzle for a faster stream, but even then, the stream doesn't reach the tree and barely makes a dent, leaving him disappointed. He goes back to the angel and asks how to use magic properly. The angel says the key to magic is imagination, and he needs a clear idea of what he wants to do, and with time, he'll gain experience. Ryo returns to the forest and uses his magic as the angel suggested, noticing big improvement. He goes back inside and manages to fill the tub with warm water by using the opposite of the ice spell. The next day, he starts practicing making ice from the air and actually succeeds, though it's really slow, but at least now it works. This leads to his goal of offensive ice magic, creates an ice spear, but can't launch it very far. He thinks launching ice is harder than launching water, but decides to keep training until he's as good at it as he is with water balls. He tries again with ice arrows, but can't get it right even after a lot of effort, and feels like he might pass out from losing so much of his magical energy. He goes back inside, wanting to light a fire, but can't do it because there's no sun like before, so he faces a new challenge to solve this problem. The next day, he started training again with the ice arrows. After a few days, he managed to shape an ice arrow but couldn't shoot it properly yet. Still, he made a spear and went off on an adventure. He went to the forest outside the barrier, where there were also traces of big monsters. He got closer to the river and found a quartz stone on the bank. He thought this would help him light a fire even after sunset, and that now all he had left was to gather some purifying herbs to declare today's adventure a success. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind him. Ryo felt its presence, turned around, and was scared when he saw it. It was a wild boar, which rooted him to the spot in fear. The boar charged at him, but just as it got close, Ryo remembered the previous accident and dodged before the boar could hurt him. The boar charged him again, but this time, Ryo told himself he couldn't move but could still use his magic. He used the power of ice in the boar's path, causing it to slip and fall, then summoned ice arrows, which the boar crashed into, killing it. Rio felt relieved after that. Back home, Rio prepared the boar's hide to use as clothing. He succeeded in lighting a fire indoors without needing the sun and started reading the monster book. He saw that the boar he killed was actually one of the weakest ranks of wild boar, and that the encyclopedia he was reading from was for beginners. The last 2 pages were named as special editions. He read that any dragon could completely destroy a whole city with ease, and that if you met one, you should run away immediately. Rio thought that made sense, as meeting a dragon could mean certain disaster. Then he read about another monster called Akuma, which wasn't a fallen angel, as noted in the book, and it warned that you wouldn't want to meet one. That's when Rio realized how vast the world was because of all the different monsters. The next day, Rio took off his clothes and headed into the forest. He started picking and tasting fruits, enjoying them a lot while wearing his boar fur clothes. While wandering around the forest again, a giant bird attacked, nearly catching him, but he just barely dodged. The bird was so strong it ended up breaking the forest trees. Rio started running away and tried to slow the bird using ice panels. He figured this type of bird used a hidden kind of magic offensive wind magic, but its main weapons were its powerful charges, sharp talons, and beak. He couldn't escape. Rio stopped and shot some water arrows at the bird, but it dodged all his attacks. As the bird got closer, Rio created an ice barrier to protect himself, causing the bird to crash into it and fall to the ground. Rio approached with his weapon aimed at the bird, but the bird quickly flew off, maybe worried Rio would kill it. As it flew, Rio saw the bird had a wound in its eye, which made it fly away from his path. Rio lay down and realized that peaceful life was harder than he expected. It was nightfall, and he was still lost in the forest from running away from the bird, having lost his way back home. He started walking, thinking he might be on the right path, but then saw a lake with a headless body and a horse, which shocked him. The next day, Rio continued wandering the forest, kept killing monsters with ice arrows, and used his spear to fish, then went home and stocked up on fish. He also started training on ice panels. He went to the river, dove deep, and ended up being chased out by a giant octopus. Then, he used his water magic to cut stones. Feeling happy he succeeded. He thought that if he enhanced the ice's hardness with magic, it could work like a grindstone. He also felt that he was starting to master his magic. Next, we're back to the headless body. Rio faced off against it and said to himself that the monster book didn't mention Dullahan monsters, maybe because they're too advanced to be in a beginner's book. Rio didn't care though and attacked it with multiple strikes, but couldn't manage to hurt it. The monster, on the other hand, succeeded in hitting Rio and nearly finished him off with a second blow, but Rio dodged in time, thinking maybe he'd got the upper hand. The monster dodged his attack and hit Rio again, knocking him to the ground. Rio felt utterly exhausted and thought he didn't stand a chance against it, but realized there was a reason the monster was coming to this place every night. He realized that maybe the monster was trying to train him up to reach another level. Then, the monster showed him a sword made of water, which surprised Rio. The monster handed him the sword, and Rio guessed that it wanted him to master it. Rio received the sword, still surprised, and then the monster walked away. Then Rio went back to the forest and faced off with the giant bird again, noticing the scratch in its eye looked darker than before, and wondered if it had evolved. The bird launched wind magic at Rio, but he blocked it by creating ice barriers. Rio was shocked when the bird destroyed the barriers and started running away while defending himself at the same time. The bird kept attacking, and Rio kept making more barriers, even trying ice arrows, but they didn't hit the bird at all. The bird broke through the barriers using its sound powers and attacked Rio, but he dodged. He was amazed by the bird's improved strength. Then Rio got hit with a thunderous attack, knocking him to the ground. The bird pounced and nearly grabbed him with its talons, but he blocked with his new sword. The bird appeared behind him and used wind powers, which Rio managed to block. The bird flew high, ready to attack again, and swooped down, but Rio stabbed it with the sword skillfully, making the bird crash to the ground. Rio approached, thinking the bird was back to take revenge for the injury to its eye and couldn't accept the loss. He asked it to help him become stronger so he could face it again and thanked it for making him feel better. Then he pulled part of the sword out of the bird's body and told it that he knew it had evolved to get revenge, but he was going to finish it now and would show his respect. Then he struck with the full sword until the bird bled and fell dead. A dragon suddenly appeared, flying in the sky, and landed in front of Rio in the forest, shocking him. He was even more surprised when the dragon spoke to him, saying it'd been a long time since it used telepathy and wasn't sure if it still worked. Rio asked him about telepathy, and the dragon asked whether he'd met a bird that had evolved from a killing falcon in that place. Rio replied that he did, and asked if the bird had belonged to the dragon, apologizing if it was. The dragon understood it was defeated, and told Rio it was quite an achievement, noticing that Rio held a rare weapon. When Rio showed the weapon, the dragon said it belonged to the king of fairies, and that since the king gave it to Rio, he must have done something to deserve it. Rio wanted to ask a few questions, but the dragon said he had to go. Rio said he understood and was grateful for everything, but before the dragon left, Rio asked for its name. The dragon said his name was Lewin, then flew high into the sky. Rio never thought he'd talk to a dragon in his life, but in a fantasy world like this, anything was possible. Then we go to the angel, who felt like he was overlooking something. He saw that Rio had a hidden ability and was surprised by this, since the last person with this ability was a girl who'd been sent to another world 0 years ago. In Rio's case, his hidden ability was eternal youth. Rio went to the coast to get some seafood and was shocked by the terrible scene. There were 2 soldiers lying on the ground who had been attacked while sailing by one of the coastal monsters, which led to the destruction of their ship and them drowning. Rio heard one of them groan, which surprised him. Then, we moved to Rio's house, where he brought one of the soldiers. The soldier regained consciousness and had with him a very important necklace. He asked himself where he was, then left the house to explore the area. Rio appeared behind him, which startled the soldier because he hadn't noticed him before and couldn't describe him due to the clothes Rio was wearing. The soldier thought, "This isn't the person I'll tell about what happened to me." Then the soldier introduced himself as Abel and told Rio he was grateful for saving him. Rio told him he hadn't done anything, just brought him to his house, and mentioned he was the only survivor among the soldiers. Abel said they were smugglers and told Rio not to worry about them, which puzzled Rio. Abel felt hungry, so Rio offered to eat while talking, which sounded good to Abel. Rio introduced himself to Abel. Then they moved to the dining table, and Abel asked Rio if he had any clothes. Rio didn't have any garments or materials to make clothes, and couldn't sew them either. Abel asked if Rio could go buy some, but didn't finish the question, thinking Rio probably couldn't afford it because if he had money, he would have gotten necessities for himself. Abel felt he had insulted Rio, who saved his life, but Rio actually lived far from any town or people. Abel guessed Rio hunted the food and asked if Rio also used a certain knife. Rio said he used the knife for 2 things: to defend himself and to clean the animals he hunted. Rio showed Abel he could create water, telling him he was a water mage, which amazed Abel. Abel said only about half the population can do that, even in the central districts, and Abel couldn't do it either. Rio was surprised at the number since he remembered the angel telling him it was only 20%. Abel asked Rio to take him to the coast because he wanted to check something, so they headed there. While walking, Abel asked if Rio had a staff since he was a mage, but Rio didn't have one. Abel thought to himself that was the second time he slipped up and guessed Rio only had a staff but lived in poverty. Abel asked Rio to take the lead in case anything happened, offering to stay behind, but Rio refused. Abel couldn't wait and moved ahead to repay Rio for saving him, and also because he didn't want his reputation tarnished by saving Rio all the time. Rio agreed and told him he'd rely on him. When they reached the coast, the bodies had disappeared. They started searching and thought the bodies were either eaten or washed into the sea. Abel guessed that might have happened to him too if Rio hadn't saved him. Rio confirmed Abel was lucky for that, but Abel said he'd think about it later. Abel told Rio not to be too formal with him because he didn't like being called sir by the man who saved him. Rio did it thinking Abel was older, but then agreed Abel was right and would call him Abel only. Abel thanked Rio, said he treated friends that way and preferred it like that. Rio was surprised Abel called him a friend and looked up, trusting what the angel told him. Abel finished searching the ship but didn't find what he was looking for. Rio asked what he would do now, and Abel said he wanted to meet his friends. He said the town of Lon would be a fresh start, but it seemed like he had drifted far south. Rio wasn't sure where Lon was but thought it required a long trip north. Abel understood he needed to prepare well. Abel then asked Rio if he wanted to come with him. Rio was surprised by the request. Abel knew it was sudden and asked Rio to think it over because he needed his help and had no idea where he was or the way to Lon, so he badly needed a guide. Rio agreed but wanted to prepare and asked Abel to move out tomorrow, and from then on, he'd be his guide. Abel was very happy and shook Rio's hand. Back at Rio's house, he told himself that after arranging his life to be calm, he would now make it exciting. He entered and told Abel he was going to say goodbye to someone. Abel was surprised he would visit this person so late, but Rio only saw him at this time and wanted to tell him he'd be gone for a while. Abel told Rio to be careful and guessed he was going to someone dear because Rio had told him no one lived there. Then Rio met the Fairy King and told him he'd be away starting tomorrow. He thanked the king for everything that helped him stay alive. He said this would be their final battle, so he would fight harder than usual. They fought with strong strikes. Some exchanged quickly in between. scene. After some time, the fight ended, but Rio was extremely exhausted. The fairy king left, but Rio thanked him before he disappeared. The king showed Rio a big water orb and brought it close to him. Inside was battle armor, which made Rio happy as it was for him. He told the king he would wear it proudly. Then the king left. The next day, Abel waited for Rio until he came out wearing the new armor and told him they had to set out now. When Rio stepped away from his house, he looked back longingly, then continued walking through the forest. While walking, they met a wild monster. Abel told Rio to stay back and took care of it himself. He drew his sword and attacked the monster, landing a blow that killed it. Rio was surprised Abel used combat skills and asked about them. Abel said mages usually didn't know combat skills. He explained they were like techniques used by siphoners and others who fought with weapons. Rio understood. Then night fell upon them, and they slept in one of the trees. The next day, they continued to move until they reached a lake filled with lizards. Abel believed that they were very strong in the river, and that defeating them would be difficult. He told Rio to take another path through the forest. As they moved, Rio felt that the lizards were on their way to them, and he informed Abel of this. Abel saw that he needed to prepare well, and Rio also planned to use his magic to fight because there were so many of them. When Abel wanted to warn Rio that he didn't have a staff to fight with, Rio launched a set of ice arrows that killed the lizards. He informed Abel about a large group coming. After they finished dealing with the lizards, Abel asked Rio what kind of spell he had used. Rio told him it was a water spell used to shoot the ice arrows, but Abel was surprised to see Rio launch 4 arrows at once. He thought that arrows were released one at a time in each cast, not all together like Rio did. This was what he knew about the wind mage he was familiar with. However, Rio thought that things might be different with wind magic, but it was normal in water magic. Abel found this strange, but didn't care, and asked Rio to keep moving. However, Rio showed him a cup of water because they needed to drink before moving on. Abel was surprised again and asked Rio why he had changed the spell from let water flow to this now. This surprised Rio, and Abel told him that he was just imagining things. He then moved on. After that, Abel used a coin to determine the direction of the path, and then they walked towards a path called Lun. Rio was amazed as it was the first time he had seen a coin. Abel explained that this coin was a bronze florin used in the kingdom of Nightly, where Lun is located. Rio really liked the name Nightly. Abel told him that in the central provinces, each region produces its own currency, but they all use the same denominations. Rio then asked if the kingdom of Nightly was part of the central provinces. Abel informed him that it is one of 3 main countries, the others being the Debohi state and the Handalio Federation. Rio was curious about the Debohi state, and Abel asked him if he had a problem with it, but Rio simply didn't like the name. Abel saw that this was what was concerning Rio. As they moved to a more open area, there were many stones, and Abel defended himself against an attack from them by splitting a stone in 2. Rio then summoned an ice barrier to protect himself as well, but they found themselves surrounded by stones. Abel expected they were now in a rocky golem's nest, and asked Rio to hold his position while he would deal with the nearest one. He charged in for an attack and struck it hard, causing the stone monster to penetrate, but it didn't seem affected and quickly healed its wound. Abel realized this was of no use, but Rio wanted to try an attack. He showed a 10-layer ice wall, which ended up destroying the rocky monsters. Rio found the kinetic spells very frightening. Abel, in amazement, asked what that was. Rio explained that he had taken care of 2 of the monsters and would use the same spell on the others. They then approached one of the monsters, but it didn't move and had a magical stone. Rio figured that it was theirs now, and that it was a loot that he wanted to gather from the other stones too, but that wasn't feasible right now. They moved to another location, where they came across a huge hippopotamus, and a group of wyverns was on the way to the hippopotamus. The hippopotamus was well prepared for the wyverns, and ended up launching sound waves at them, which led to their extermination, causing Abel and Rio to be astonished. Rio was very excited about this. As night fell, they made a fire. Abel was surprised at the dispelling spell used by the hippopotamus, as he had heard that it has this effect. Rio was very interested in the dispel and wanted to discover one for himself. But Abel halted him, saying he was lucky because the dispel was found in Lun in the central provinces. Rio was annoyed for being kept in the dark about it, but that was never Abel's intention, as he didn't know Rio was interested in the dispel at all. Rio then asked Abel if there were other things he had forgotten to tell him. Abel replied that he assumed Rio knew about the dwarves and elves, right? However, Rio asked Abel to give him the details. Abel clarified that the dwarves were skilled craftsmen and fierce fighters, and there were some of them in Lun, but there weren't many elves there since they lived in the forest and didn't want to live outside it. Rio understood this and had believed so as well. The next day, they wore the clothing of the beast they had hunted, and Rio said that after they crossed these mountains, they would meet the lands of humans. Abil confirmed this and asked Rio where he got this information. He recalled his previous conversation with the dragon about the existence of another continent. The dragon had told him that this land was surrounded by sea on the east, west, and south, with a range of mountains to the north separating it from the neighboring continent. Therefore, it was unlikely they would encounter any humans coming from the south from their lands in the north. He then returned to focus and told Abil that it was better not to know where he got his information from, as it could be knowledge that transcended human boundaries. They continued walking but heard a noise coming from within the mountains. Suddenly, a monster made of birds appeared, and Abil felt intense fear. However, Rio threw food to the monster, and Abil did the same, which resulted in the monster grabbing the food and flying away. Rio felt happy because they succeeded in this, as did Abil. They continued to move, but Abil felt that this monster left them with an unforgettable impression, and Rio believed they would have been in danger if they had fought it. However, Abil thought humans weren't created to fight such monsters, and hadn't encountered any behemoths or griffins for centuries. He believed that something was wrong in this area, but Rio felt that Abil was hurting him with his words, stating that it was humans who didn't put in the effort. Abil then asked, what was the point of putting in that effort anyway? They headed north, and Rio believed that the wyverns had come from the north until they found some of them. Abil didn't want that and wondered what they would do, but Rio anticipated they would fight. Abil saw that the wyverns were much stronger than them, and that it would be difficult for just the two of them to confront them, as catching them would require about 10 very strong adventurers, and even then, there would be losses. However, Rio felt that they might face a decent number of them and possibly wouldn't be able to avoid a fight. He asked if it wouldn't be easy to fight them while they were focused on the ground. Abil thought so too, and he presumed he could reach them with his sword. Rio then stepped forward to settle the matter, and Abil followed him. Rio cast the ice arrow spell, and as the wyverns were hit by the ice arrows, Abil attacked immediately until other monsters appeared and charged at him, but he dodged their attack. Rio then launched arrows at them as well, and succeeded in hitting them. When they fell, Rio asked Abil to go and collect their magical stones. Abil thought this was very easy, but then Rio asked Abil if he was expecting a decisive battle that made his heart race. However, Abil didn't want that at all, and asked Rio to stick to their plans because they were ideal. Rio had no objection as long as Abil was okay with it. Then another group of wyverns appeared heading toward them, but Abil wasn't afraid this time and told Rio to eliminate this group too. Rio thought that Abil was addicted to battles, but Abil wasn't like that. These monsters were just blocking their way, and they would fight them now or later. He charged in, and Rio followed suit. After that, they continued walking until they felt happy because they reached the place they wanted.